What's the real end game here? We begin tonight with Elliot Ackerman, former Marine Raider, CIA Special Activities Officer, author of Sheepdogs. Mike Sarraille, retired U.S. Navy SEAL officer, former enlisted recon Marine Scout Sniper, retired four-star General Wesley Clark, former Supreme Allied Commander. As the ranking officer, General, we'll start with you in this.
Thanks.
Yeah, you don't need a carrier battle group to blow up a couple of drug-running boats. At least from in terms of what options the president now has, because a carrier strike group is off the coast of Venezuela in a week. What does this provide the Pentagon to give President Trump in terms of options?
Well, I think it's more than Venezuela. That's the first thing. I think there's different sets of issues. Number one is the American people and the Congress are not being told what this is about. It's clearly not about drugs, as you said. So what is it about? He's preparing a major use of force. There's not an emergency. He owes the American people an explanation, and the Defense Department owes us an explanation. That's number one. Number two is, if there's some military action against Venezuela, Venezuela is not the centerpiece of the drug business. So maybe it's against Maduro, and maybe he's after regime change. And so he can go in with special operations forces. He could seize terrain. He can go grab the presidential palace. He could secure a port. He can take down an airfield. He could deploy troops in the streets of Caracas. But can he occupy the country and pacify it? Absolutely not. So maybe you do a targeted strike. But I think the message is to all the countries in the region. I think it's to Mexico. I think it's to Panama. And I think it's to the American people that this administration is willing to use military force in unconventional ways, and it won't be bound by the niceties of congressional consultations and public discussions and reports of what the plan is and so forth.
Yeah,
We're in a different era.
Yeah, I had a former very senior member of the U.S. military establishment and diplomatic corps say he's the only president in recent memory who makes the other world leaders wonder if he's going to pull the trigger or not. And a carrier battle group gives you an enormous amount of options in terms of what triggers to pull. Elliot Ackerman, next to you. The president seemed to confirm that there was CIA operations on the ground inside Venezuela. We're going to speculate, obviously, but what options does the CIA on the ground provide the president?
I mean, the CIA has the ability to conduct covert operations, which the United States government does not need to acknowledge. I mean, that first and foremost is the largest delineation between military action and action that the Central Intelligence Agency can take. But a significant wrinkle, and to go back to sort of what General Clark was saying, is when this is done outside of congressional authorization, outside of certain presidential authorizations even, it places CIA officers in a position where they could later be found criminally negligent for, let's say, killing Americans who are on a boat. We saw this after 9/11, where with waterboarding, where individual CIA officers were found criminally liable years after these events took place. So if I'm sitting at CIA right now, I'm also worrying about the liability that myself and other officers will take on in undergoing some of these types of operations.
Interesting. I want to get to Mike in a second, but General, real quickly, in terms of, and I understand the idea of needing congressional authorization before you start a war, which is what carrier battle groups are meant to do. But to move the carrier battle group, you're not suggesting the president needs congressional authorization, are you?
No, he can move the battle group anywhere he wants. But this is a kind of compilation of force that's normally been in the Gulf. This is what you put in the Pacific to deter China. So it's a huge signal to people in the region, also people in the United States, that we're not as concerned about Russia and China as we are about what's going on in the hemisphere.
I have an idea when it comes to Russia on this with Maduro, but I want to get to Mike real quickly. Mike, what do you look for in terms of seeing that this is going to escalate beyond a show of force and blowing up boats? What do we start seeing that indicates there is a war that might start?
Well, I don't think Trump has hidden from the fact that he wants a regime change in Venezuela. This is a huge show of force, and let's remember who President Trump is. If he's going to do something, he's going to do it large. Do I think there's going to be a full-scale invasion? Absolutely not. But I do want to bring something into picture here. Is we need to remember we've been at war with the cartels, the war on drugs, for over 30 years. We finally have a president with the fortitude under Article 2 that is actually taking action against the cartels. 22,000 pounds of fentanyl was confiscated. We don't know how much made it through. And that's enough to kill 5 billion people, 15 times the population of the United States. Guys, this is within our hemisphere. We know that our enemies, both the cartels and foreign agencies or foreign countries, are waging asymmetric war on us within our hemisphere, and the U.S. is now the battlefield. Over 1.5 million Americans have died from drug overdoses over the last few decades. That's more than
Mike,
ISIS.
you're making the point we made on the show for a year when we said, to your point, way more Americans killed by the cartels and the drugs they bring in and the drug wars than in terrorism. But General, back to you, just because I think this merges your two areas of expertise, both in especially your time as the Supreme Allied Commander. Nicolas Maduro is one of Vladimir Putin's two allies and client states in the Western Hemisphere, Cuba being the other. It looks to me, at least, that there would be a possibility of putting enough pressure on Venezuela and threatening regime change there that you make a trade with Putin for a peace deal in Ukraine. In return, Maduro gets to stay in power. Battle Group gives President Trump the credible threat of regime change, right?
Well, it would, but it also sort of establishes the fact that, hey, I'm going after Venezuela. Hey, you can take care of Ukraine. I'm getting to Venezuela. Don't you get in my way with Venezuela, and you can do what you want in Ukraine.
Goes the other way.
So the key distinguishing factor here is that the framework of the rules-based international organization, which is what the United States tried to build and sustain since World War II, is fraying. It's going. So you don't see any reference to the United Nations. You don't see any legal justification for what we're doing. It's, might makes right. And what we thought is generations of American statesmen thought that after the experiences of World War I and then the startup of World War II, we had to build a different world, not a world where powerful nations can attack and suppress weak nations. And so you needed the framework of international law and the United Nations. Now, it seems that I'm not disputing anything that, we know about the drug. They're terrible. And Venezuela, Maduro's a bad guy. And sure, it'd be great to get rid of him. He's not a major enemy of the United States. He's not going to overrun the United States. And so a lot of the drug deaths in the United States are caused by opioid and our own people. So you have to see the big picture on this.
That's fair. What we've been showing on the screen right now is the national television, state television of Venezuela that's been putting out all these military drills, and Maduro saying that, anybody who comes near his shores is going to be obliterated, and on and on. Elliot, to you, in terms of scouting targets, taking out cartel leaders, taking out drug infrastructure on the ground, you're an author. I'm a voracious reader of spy novels. This feels a lot to me like Clear and Present Danger, the great Tom Clancy movie and novel. If anybody wants to, they should run it over the weekend. But it feels to me like that, except rather than covert, this is overt.
Sure, but I think, absent a larger strategy, you're just moving dirt around. And, the last 20 years taught us anything in places like Iraq and Afghanistan is you can hit targets all day long. And guess what? The next day, more targets pop up. That's not how you're going to get rid of the cartels. It's not how you're going to create any type of sustainable regime change in Venezuela. I think our adversaries in Russia and China would love nothing more to see significant amounts of U.S. military power tied down in a quixotic campaign to change the regime in Venezuela and prop up some new regime. So I think if there is going to be action, there needs to be some type of strategic plan explained to the Congress and the American people. Otherwise, I'm not exactly certain what we're doing down there. And I don't think it'll be sustainable for President Trump to stay down there much longer unless some type of strategic vision is articulated.
Yeah, I keep feeling like he has something up his sleeve, that the chess pieces are moving and we don't quite understand the chessboard or what the game is yet. to continue the metaphor. Mike, to you on this. White House advisor told Axios, leaving Maduro in power in Venezuela is like making Jeffrey Epstein the head of a daycare. Is there a way to have regime change? And obviously there's a Venezuelan government waiting in the wings that is more U.S. friendly. Is there a way to have regime change without large-scale war based on the amount of military hardware that's around Venezuela right now?
I think to Elliot's point, it requires a strategy and it requires time. That is both a combination of a CIA Title 10 and military Title 50 special operations missions. It would take time. Is it possible? There's other asymmetric means to hit their economy with more sanctions, stricter sanctions, apply pressures from different degrees, whether diplomatically, through military operations, economically, or information warfare. But that would take time, and that would take a very, very strong, very focused strategy in order to make that happen.
All right, Elliot, Mike, thank you very much. General as well. We wait over the weekend. Carrier Battle Group will be there in the Caribbean Sea sometime early next week. Thank you all.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.